Warren leave?
Mic test. Mic test. Mic test.
Oh, the other thing too.
Testing the audio in room 1050. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. If everyone could take their seat. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to your Innovation, Technology, and General Services Committee. I am joined, as usual, by Council Members Bonin and O'Farrell. And we've got a couple of interesting items today. So let's start, Mr. Villanueva. Are there any general public comment cards today?
None, sir. We don't have any.
No general public comments. Okay, great. Unless there is an objection from my colleagues, I recommend that items 2 through 13 be approved on consent. They're what we usually go through with in terms of the destruction of old records. No objection. Without objection, that is so ordered. Mr. Villanueva, could you please read those items into the record?
All right, sir. Items 2 to 13 are city attorney reports relative to the request to destroy obsolete records. Items 2 to 12 are from the Los Angeles Police Commission for the LAPD for various divisions, while the last item, item 13, is from the Los Angeles World Airports Accounting Division.
Great. And I assume we have no public comments on those?
No speaker cards, sir.
Great. Without objection, those items are approved. Mr. Villanueva, would you please read item number 1?
Yes, sir. Item number 1 is a motion by Council Members Bonin, Englander, and Fentes relative to the Los Angeles Fire Department and Information Technology Agency's Fire Strategic Technology Integration First In Master Plan for the purposes of enhancing service delivery to the community. This item is also referred to the Public Safety Committee, and we have 2 speaker cards for this item, sir.
Great. Thank you. We'll get to those cards. So we have members from the fire department and volunteers from the private sector who've been involved in the first working group on this topic. Because of our limited space, we're going to start off with presentations from the fire department, and then we'll have our private sector volunteers come forward with their presentation, and then we'll have the general public comment cards, and in between each presentation we'll have time for questions from council members. And so I'd like to invite, we already have Assistant Chief Pat Butler and his team to the table. And before we get started, I want to offer the maker of this motion a chance for some opening comments, if you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I very much appreciate the opportunity to make opening comments. I really appreciate that you've scheduled the item here in committee today. This is an initiative that I started my first week on council, and I've been very excited about the potential of it and also the progress we've seen on this. This idea, it's more formally labeled First In, but the sort of shorthand for it has been iPads for firefighters, is while a technology initiative is first and foremost a public safety matter. This is about enhancing the tools that our rank-and-file firefighters have. It's about better deploying firefighters. It is about neighborhood safety and reducing our response times. This idea actually came about not because I represent a tech-savvy district and not because I'm all that smart and elected official. It's because I was following the lead.
All those things are true.
All those things are true, yes. But because I was following the lead of our rank and file, both what they were doing and the needs they were articulating. My first day in office, I visited a couple fire stations and was horrified to see our firefighters using binders full of shortcuts to navigate through the canyons and the mountains of Brentwood. Laminated maps that were cracking, old paper maps. You know, I joked that we have firefighters in LAFD who are of an age that the first time that they ever touched or saw a Thomas Guide was when they came to work for the city of Los Angeles. Meanwhile, we have high school kids who can find their way to any mall or yogurt shop with the GPS on an iPhone. And I discovered when I was talking about the need for tablet technology with our rank and file that they were a few steps ahead of us and that they were going rogue a little bit and figuring out a way to do this themselves. And some of them were actually designing their own apps. And we're going to hear from some of the guys today. And what I have seen over the course of the pilot they've been doing in my district is potential for mapping and GPS technology, for paperless reporting, for fire prevention, for incident command, which has actually been used in some recent fires, for community education and engagement, even air operations. The important thing to note, too, is not just the what of this, but the how of this. And when we suggested this idea, we thought this was an incredible opportunity for public-private partnership, that with the resources of Silicon Beach and the technology we have here and the brainpower in Los Angeles, it would be a great opportunity to rely on and draw from the experience of our tech sector and our private sector. And the Chamber of Commerce, Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce Bixel Exchange stepped up and sort of married themselves to this pilot project and brought in some really superstar thinkers and doers to help make this even better. And I'm looking forward to hearing from them again today. And I'm both surprised and delighted at how well the pilot project has been going and the different potential we've seen from it. So I'm excited about this report today, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for scheduling it.
Absolutely, and we'll hear from the fire department. Just say, I mean, this one of the nice things about this committee. All of us are new members to the council, but I think the whole council in general is really excited about the idea of capacity building technologically for the city to have us jump from the 19th century straight to the 21st century, and we've been expressing that in a variety of forms on this committee, whether it's the 311 proposal or Wi-Fi or all the different things that we're doing as a committee and as a council. It's nice that we're focusing now on First In and the fire department, because that is, a critical part of how we build our technological capacity to make us better as a city. And so I'm excited to hear your proposal. So unless you have an opening comment, I'd like to move to the fire department, to Mr. Butler to get us started.
Thank you very much, council members. Assistant Chief Patrick Butler, Los Angeles Fire Department Training Division, and I'm here with a lot of staff while I'll be doing some of the speaking. Captain Fields, Pilot Davison, Chief Palacios, and Chief Benish, as well as part of the team, and the team members from the Bixel Exchange. So this is really a collaborative effort, and you'll get to hear a little bit more from my colleagues here who can actually give you a boots-on-the-ground perspective. Captain Fields is a captain in Fire Station 82 in Hollywood. He runs calls day in and day out. And Chief Pilot Davison, we rarely get to see a pilot, and probably this may be the first time a pilot has spoken in a committee, because these are generally the nameless, faceless heroes that fly in the skies and rescue our children and put fires out. And Scott will be here today to also talk about how we use technology in air operations and aviation. The motion was designed to accomplish three things from our perspective when we read it, is that provide tablet technology to end-user firefighters so that they can do their job more effectively and efficiently. And really that's where it's at. The boots on the ground is what can we give them to make them do their job better, safer, more efficiently. Second part of this was to collaborate with the local tech developers and the private sectors and academia to share and develop best practices and provide us with that outside perspective. We generally don't have that perspective. You know, firefighters, oftentimes we have tunnel vision, and tunnel vision is good, but sometimes we need funnel vision, and funnel vision is what the outsiders can give us. And we learned a lot from partnering with the Bixel Exchange. And the third part of this is to aggregate and integrate the various databases of the department. There's 18 databases in the LAFD alone. And to aggregate and integrate those, that's going to be kind of a monumental task. You're going to need a lot of true grit to get that done. But Mr. Renneker here from ITA, when we get to that point, he's been in a recent meeting with us, and we talked about that. When we get to that step, that'll kind of require a little more holistic view. So we wanted to take this in bite-sized elements. So we took the first and second part of the motion. One thing I like to point out, it's essentially at no cost. We've done this really with just some staffing hours from the department. Chief Featherstone has been very supportive of this project, and with the fresh new leadership on the council and the mayor's 9 goals that we're aligning ourselves with, it's been really a great thing for us to work with and have that vision. The task force was established in July of 2013 after the motion was introduced in council. The councilman's first day in office was in a fire station, and that's kind of cool. A lot of the firefighters talk about that his first day in office was visiting a firehouse, and he got to see firsthand kind of what we have. And what you're going to see today is some old technology we use, and it's not an indictment on the department. We have paper maps, and we have, and believe it or not, we have the 2014 Thomas Guide. I don't think my kids will even know what a Thomas Guide is, and they never will probably. But so we'll talk about some of the old technologies we have. The task force was established. Rich Fields, myself, and a firefighter from Venice who also sits on the Venice Neighborhood Council, firefighter paramedic Savon Gerard, we kind of came together to work on this. Kind of before I begin, just let you know that this was driven by the input of firefighters and field supervisors. We reached across all the geographic areas of the city, and over 150 firefighters have been directly involved with providing us input, hands-on, either through direct observation or they've been using the equipment. So this is really designed and developed, what I would say, on the shop floor. The shop has kind of said, this is what we'd like to have. It's a bottom-driven project, and what you'll see today is really kind of our end state right now is that we have iPads currently being beta tested in fire stations right now, and I can tell you that we have some real measurable deliverables as we speak. One of them was improved response times. That's one of the areas we want to focus on. I spoke to a captain the other day that said that the iPad tablet that we had issued him for the beta test had helped him improve response time on a recent call, because on the map he was using, the crease, he couldn't see what street it was on, and he was responding out of his district. So response times are improving. Secondly, improved patient care. I spoke to a paramedic the other day who said there's a paramedic app available on the iTunes store that gives him a quick reference guide on different medications. And it also has a language translation app, so if you speak a foreign language, and we can quickly be able to interact with the community, and that's a patient care area that we're improving. The next area is increased firefighter safety. Enhancing situational awareness. I had a captain the other day tell me they were going to a fire. They pulled up the image on their iPad, and they saw that the building had solar panels. Well, solar panels are great renewable energy, great for the city, but it offers challenges to firefighters. But him knowing that before he went in was able to adjust his strategy. Reduce costs. We're not really traveling as much. Our job is to mobilize the workforce. We're not spending the fuel. It's improving our training. Enhancing customer service. We're quickly being able to go out to the scene of an incident and give the customers the information that they're looking for, whether it's a recruit member who wants to join the fire department, we can give them the link, we can get their email and capture that. And then finally, in the area of training. My training staff currently has 10 iPads issued to them, and this morning I was with them using a remote unmanned aerial platform, a small, what I would call drone, although drone is not a real nice term to use, I guess, but we were using that to take an image of a training scenario. And so we were flying this around, and we were downloading the image on our iPad. The next phase of this is we'll be able to directly link aerial footage from a drone onto our iPad. So I'd like to kind of just give you a little bit of overview of some of the charts I have here, and then I'm going to have Captain Fields and Pilot Davison kind of go into it. And so a couple of things what we'll show here is the first picture is our department library. And our department library is a static library that's found in the fire stations. And oftentimes when we need to access critical information or policies and procedures, we generally need to go back to the firehouse. Well, that's an important library to have, but it's going to be a lot more effective on this iPad tablet device. The next image I'd like to show you is how we've recently used the iPads at some recent incidents. So right here, the Colby Fire. I was dispatched by the city to be the agency rep at the Colby Fire in Glendora. This is an actual application that the division supervisor and strike team leader sent me about where the fire was, where the evacuations issue were, where his resources were, and he was instantly able to send me that on my iPad out in the field. And it helped us tremendously because we were able to determine what areas we needed to evacuate and what areas we didn't. And that evacuation is a big impact. Next slide here is going to be how we communicated with the boots-on-the-ground fire captains from the other agencies. In this one, this gentleman with the orange helmet is giving some radio frequency designators and trying to tell the fire department member where those resources are. And so he's capturing the information on the iPad, and he's also capturing the frequency information, and he's going to respond out to where those troops are and give them equipment. These are actual, real, this is what we're doing, where this is not, this is not a concept. This is being implemented today. This next is a fire we had in West Los Angeles where we were able to look at the building, designate the resources, determine the locations geographically on the building, and be able to kind of have a real good overview of what we're dealing with. This improves firefighter safety. This reduces loss to buildings because we know exactly where we should deploy our tactics. And the last one speaks to our performance measurements. FireStat LA is an opportunity for us to take technology and management practices and kind of blend them together. This is an actual app that we have on our iPads that can lay out our response times, our turnout times, how we're doing on EMS calls, how we're doing on fire calls, specifically areas of interest like LAX. We have a critical infrastructure there, so it'll tell us what kind of incidents we're having there. And so in general, that's kind of the overview I'd like to give, but I think it'll be better if it's more interactive and I have my colleagues kind of step in. And Rich, if you want, you can actually maybe grab the mic, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Mr. Fields.
I think Rich will be able to give kind of a better sense of, he's the boots on the ground captain. He's in your communities, and you're going to tell he has a passion for this. So that's pretty cool.
Good afternoon, Honorable Councilman. It's my pleasure to be here. This is not the first attempt that we've made to see the fire department advance. I will echo Chief Butler's comments that this is by no means an indictment of our fire department. I am honored to work for Los Angeles Fire Department now in my 21st year. We are truly a world-class organization. Our tactics, our strategies, our policies and procedures that have been put in place by our leadership make us a world-renowned department, draw interest from around the world, how we fight fire, the reasons that we do things, the tactics that we employ. But how we support that effort using technology is where we need to become world-class also, and we are committed to seeing that happen. And so thank you very much for having us here. Our working model embodies what we call the core values of the fire department. We have those plaques in every fire department location throughout the city. And we've adopted those as part of how we do our job in this committee and seeking more advancement when it comes to technology. And one of the things that it says, it directs us as members of the department to do is to look beyond our traditional scope of our individual positions to promote teamwork and organizational effectiveness. And the old adage that, well, you're a firefighter, you should just stay on the fire truck. And you're IT, so you handle IT. is not a model that is going to have us advance. It's a collaboration. It's us working together. It's using us, stepping outside of the norm, as it were. Part of the vision statement is that our individual members, whether sworn or civilian, are truly our greatest asset. So as our working model, we focused on the people that are going to be using this technology first. We asked them what they wanted, what would they like to see. And the reception has been overwhelming. All the answers are there. We didn't have to come up with anything. We didn't have to really propose anything. We just had to listen. But in sticking with part of those core values, we have to put a value on their input. The end product must incorporate what they see themselves using. When they feel part of the solution, they're going to use it, and quite frankly, they'll be more effective in how they do their jobs.
I appreciate that. Is there any additional members of the fire team want to continue on the presentation?
Just as a matter of these are the building inventory plans. I'll show you just some of the processes, and like you say, this is kind of just show you what we use. Backup maps are important to have, and the building inventory plans are, but there's a lot of tech developers out there that are designing these pre-plans for schools. In fact, we met with a local developer here in Los Angeles who's developing blueprints for schools that they'll give to the fire department for free. And so there's a lot of folks out there that we worked with that are like really anxious and moving forward ahead in areas of public safety for us. I will tell you that before I move on to Scott Davison, our chief pilot, he can give you a little aviation perspective, is that I can give you some testimonials, and one that's really important to me. This morning I met with a captain at Fire Station 5, 29 years on the job, Captain Cedillos, and he said one of the best things he's seen in his career, I mean, he's 29 years on the job, was seeing folks from the Bixel Exchange, these high-tech folks with background and experience, and come into these focus groups, because that's what we held. We held these focus groups where the private sector came in to see what is it that we do? What is our workflow? They rode out with Captain Rich Fields. They got to see what we did. They got to look at our workflow, and that was very eye-opening for them and also for us as well, because that was the funnel vision. They got to see a lot more than we're used to seeing. And this captain said that apart from the iPads, the fact that he was on the ground floor with these folks helping us to develop this new vision for the department was, for him, the most inspirational thing. You know, here's a person who pretty much has done everything in his career, and to say that was really relevant to us. And so I can't say enough great things about the partnership and the process that we went through to get to this point. And so, as you can see, we have paper maps. We do a lot of our training and reporting at a static computer back in the station. We do our fire prevention inspections based on a computer in the station where we have to go print up the card, go out and do the inspection. Well, this morning, a 33-year firefighter I met at Fire Station 5 said he used the iPad because there's a lot of new construction in Los Angeles, and which is good. It's great for the economy, but also for firefighters. They went out and did an inspection. They found that this building wasn't in their system yet. So they were able to get the iPad, get owner information, take aerial images of it, and then load it back into their database. And that was today. And what that's going to do is going to improve community safety, firefighter safety, and actually, in the long run, expedite our processes for permitting and inspections. There's been a lot of processes we went through. And when Nelson Cheng gets up here and speaks, this individual has a lot of experience at Amazon and Google with predictive behaviors and data. You'll see what he's come together. But we've collaborated to really, it's a validation of what he saw is exactly what we're feeling as firefighters. So just because we have the private sector with us and they're going to give us their input, you'll find out that it's really relevant to what we do.
So what we're trying to accomplish is a new look at our workflow. As Chief Butler mentioned, there's outside of providing service to the public. Once we leave the doors of the fire station, we're on our fire trucks. This is the map book off of my fire truck. Now, I have a 2005 state-of-the-art piece of apparatus that I get to ride on and provide service to the city, but I'm using this map to guide me. There are more red flag streets in Fire Station 82's district alone than anywhere else in the city. And this is the book that I have to rely on in case we have a wildland fire anywhere in those hills, including Griffith Park. I can take my iPad and route myself to those locations much quicker. With our staffing levels the way they are right now, we don't have very much consistency in the fire stations. There's always someone from a different fire station either driving the apparatus, in command of that fire station, firefighters from different places who are not familiar with the lay of the land. And having people drive down the street trying to look at a paper map or trying to access information that are in books and binders simply isn't the most effective workflow. And that's what we're focusing on. I should be able to process everything that I do in addition to running a call. The reporting aspect, the ancillary information that I need should be at my fingertips. And it, in effect, regardless of the staffing levels, I can't do anything about the number of calls that I have, but I can be more effective in how I provide service because I'm not having to rely on antiquated information or old information or things that are stuck at my fire station to allow me to provide service to the public.
Scott, would you like to, I think this will be very eye-opening.
Sir, thank you. I think what you're going to see, the common theme is,
Turn the mic to you.
the common theme is, between all of us, is going to be situational awareness. I'll draw a quick analogy. Many of you probably years ago remember going to the airport and seeing the pilots lug along a big square briefcase. And in that briefcase, they had all the manuals and the approach charts and the books like this. The difference is that our maps tell us how to get into and out of airports, how to manage airspace. We are in one of the most complicated airspaces in the country, and we're seeing that with the noise complaints now. We really can't go higher because there's so much air traffic that it becomes a conflict. The aircraft start running into each other. For us, the situational awareness, and let's back up even to the point where the FAA about 7 years ago recognized the importance of the tablet or that electronic age, and they actually put out an advisory circular that allowed us as pilots to use an electronic flight bag. That electronic flight bag can be come across in many different formats, the iPad, the tablet, but what it does is it allows us to start storing information. For instance, I can bring up a chart of the Van Nuys ILS, which is an instrument approach into Van Nuys Airport, which our base station is at. It georeferences my position, so instantaneously I see situationally where I am, and it coordinates with all the instrument work that I'm doing in the aircraft. Not to mention the VFR and transiting through the airspace. When we go on an emergency run into the south end of our district, which is the south end of Los Angeles, we have to transit through 5 different airspaces or 5 different airport airspaces. Those airspaces aren't, when I'm in the air, I'm basically in somebody's private airspace. I'm in their backyard, and I have to have permission to be there. So as I'm moving through the airspace at 150 miles an hour, I'm quickly spinning up frequencies and trying to contact them before I break that perimeter of their airspace. Now, for us as pilots, we here in LA City, we memorize the airspace off of geographic locations. For instance, I know the front driveway to Fire Station 14 is the northeast corner of LAX's airspace. I cannot bust that boundary without talking to them or getting permission. One of the advantages of this is it takes the workload off the pilot. It shows us the airspace where we're at. One of the other things real briefly I'm going to talk about in airspace is very frequently here we have the president or VIPs frequent the area. And when they do, they shut the airspace down. They create what's called a temporary flight restriction. These temporary flight restrictions are basically an upside-down birthday cake. The first one is a 30 nautical mile ring that they shut the airspace down. They allow us, public use, fire and police, to work within that, but we have to vet it out and go through the CIA and make phone calls. The next closer ring is a 10 nautical mile prohibited ring around the president. Now that is the do not violate unless we tell you you can violate it. Now imagine we pick up a youth in the west corner of the valley, whatever the trauma is, a car accident, and we're trying to get down to Children's Hospital, and the president is somewhere in the Century City area, somewhere in Culver City. We have to bust into that prohibited airspace, and that becomes very challenging. And where geographically it is, it's overlaid electronically on the iPad or whatever chart is. The FAA is really good about overlaying that information. But unless I have this, I'm really guessing geographically where it is. The last ring to get to the president is a 5 nautical mile ring, and that's the ring that I don't ever want to be in, because that's the ring where they don't care what color your helicopter is or who you are or who you think you are. They mean business. And with the frequency of the president and the VIPs coming into the Southland, it becomes very important. I have stories of where we have gotten close to being in the wrong area at the wrong time over the years. And this is one of the tools now that we're all using. We've all purchased our own iPads, and for the safety of the aircraft, it just becomes a necessity for the small amount of money, the value that it gets. One of the other things that it overlays in real time. Now imagine I've told you about the temporary flight restriction, I've told you about the airspace, the boundaries. All of a sudden I've got to memorize a lot of numbers, and I'm not getting any younger. Those numbers start to blur. Now I can overlay weather. I can have real-time radar hits on what the weather is. We move around the Southland in VFR conditions. That means we have to see the ground, visual flight rules. And as storm cells move through in real time, showers, and we're trying to get from one part of the city to another part of the city on an air ambulance or a rescue, we have to circumnavigate this airspace. If we have the real-time weather radar like you see on the Channel 5 News, we're able to see the cells that are coming, and we're able to shift our course to navigate around those cells. So real-time weather is really important. Some of the other features I can go into, again and get search and rescue, lat and long, maps for all of the Forest Service. Imagine you're on some trail on a hike on Saturday, and you're at the intersection of Bone Canyon and blah, blah, blah. I don't know where Bone Canyon is. But if I plug it into the map or I pull up the lat and long, all of a sudden the map has all the trailheads, and it's Razorback Ridge, and I'm able to find the victim a lot faster, especially at night. It gets very dark in the canyon, so this is one of the tools we're using currently in the aircraft. Weight and balance information, operating manuals, all of that stuff that I'm really becoming redundant and repetitive here, that we just load this iPad up with that information. Our operating handbook on one of our newer aircraft, the 139, which is technologically the most advanced aircraft that's out there. We couldn't ask for anything better. It's 5,000 pages, the operating manual. So while we memorize lots of limitations and the normal procedures and emergency procedures, it's nice to reference back to that in situations where you need it. So I'm going to move on to Chief Benish, who is going to talk about the air recon side, which is the fire mapping and a lot of the other business we do. I'm sorry, real quick. I'll talk till you're all passed out. The last thing we have, and what's important, is we're moving to a critical incident application, which is currency tracking. And it is an application that now we're looking at all of our pilots and the tasks that they do in alignment with best practice in the industry. And it says that my pilot has to fly so many missions a month at night with NVG goggles, hoisting for currency. It becomes an overwhelming task. But within that, I also have statistical data that I can grab. So I can come to a meeting, I can pull up statistical data, and I can tell you within minutes how many times my aircraft went on air ambulances over the summertime in a certain district. So that's a tool we're now able to access on a tablet or on an iPad. So, sorry, boss. Okay.
Real brief, I'll talk a little bit about our fire mapping and our situational awareness that we gain. Scott's normally in the right-hand seat, and I'm in the left-hand seat. There's a little odd configuration for us right now, but my job in that perspective is to give situational awareness to the ground, and the iPad is just a tool now that I carry with me on every mission that we go on. January 15th, we had a fire along PCH. Significant in that we had certainly had some high-value homes immediately threatened. I was Helco on that fire, and let me just tell you that the tool I had with this iPad played a significant role in assisting the incident commander in his gaining situational awareness. I was able to map that fire as we flew the fire. I was able to take pictures with the iPad and email them to the incident commander, giving him a good picture of what he had, where he had it, and where he needed to put his resources. I was able to pull up a map of the specific area, identify streets where he needed to put resources, and so he could prioritize the companies that he has at that incident. It's difficult when you're on the ground, and the perspective that we have from the air is obviously a great advantage, but we have to get that data and that information to the incident commander. And this is just the beginning. Right now, on the pictures that you saw Chief Butler share with you, it's called a fire mapping program. We use that to do our fire mapping and to trace where the fires are. They've as simple of an application as that is, they've upgraded it now. And yesterday, we combined and shared our iPads, connected them together, and as I'm drawing a finger around the map, it's going on to the iPad that's right next to me. In other words, in a fire situation, I could be in the helicopter drawing where this fire is specifically, and then that information is immediately transmitted right down to the incident commander so he can see specifically what he has. This is just a little bit of technology that we're using, and this is just as the future grows in this, as we get Wi-Fi in the aircraft, which we're looking to do, we'll be connected even more so, be able to see where the resources are, where the resources are coming from, who those resources are, and be able to assist the incident commander in placing his resources and making a quick attack on these fires. So it's an invaluable tool. We're using it every day. It's just a growing technology for us, so we're using it all the time.
Council members, if it's okay at this point, I think we're using a lot of fire department time. I'd like to really bring up the real heroes for us. The real heroes for us are the folks that we collaborate with from the tech sector, and so we'll stay up here and answer questions, but I think it'd be great. You can hang out in the back.
Sure. But why don't we bring up the members of the working group to come on up and give their presentation, and we can do our questions to the group afterwards, or any combination thereof.
My name is Sean Arian. I'm a Vice President at the LA Area Chamber of Commerce of Innovation and Technology. We want to thank you. We realize your time is short today, so we're going to go as quickly as we possibly can. I think the first thing we'd like to say is, I'm here on behalf of LA's business community to show our support, particularly to give kudos to the city council and fire department in particular, for really being open to a public-private effort in this area. So it's something that is really a sea change from what we've seen previously from the city. So what we were able to do is the fire department came to us and asked if we could help at the chamber pull together the private sector, some folks from the technology community to work with it. So what we did is we pulled together a Silicon Beach dream team of technology leaders to tackle this effort. Just to give you an idea, some of the people we have up here today and that have worked on this, it was folks from UCLA and USC, folks with strong backgrounds and from places like Google and Amazon and other places. We have people like Sam Teller at the end there, who's the co-founder of Launchpad. If you look at him, he is the face that's launched 1,000 startups. He's also had experience working on President Obama's new media team. We have folks like Eva Ho, who's sitting here, who is a co-founder of Sousa Ventures. It works on seed funding of startups, but also is a founder of a company called Factual that works on big data, a product manager for Google, YouTube, Applied Semantics, and even founded a company called Navigating Cancer that empowers cancer patients with the tools that they need to get things done. And then folks like sitting next to me, the next person you'll hear from is Nelson Chang, who is a product manager at Google. Amazon helped launch AdWords at Google. And so some of the things we did, let me just tell you really briefly about the process that we entered into. So probably around September, October, we brought together this larger than the group that's up here, but a larger group of folks. We, over the next 6 weeks or so, did a series of ride-alongs. We helped do workflow mapping, digging into the technology that the fire department had. We basically did a report back. Once Nelson did the report that you're about to see, we brought that back to a group of 30 firefighters, boots on the ground, to get their feedback, to reality test whether the recommendations actually hit the mark or not, and then change the presentation based on what the firefighters told us. So without too much more ado, I want to introduce Nelson. And what he did is he really dug in on this. He called on his own to New York Fire Department, Seattle, Phoenix, Glendale, to get best practices from other areas. And he also, basically something that normally through a city RFP process would take 6 to 9 months, he did in 3 weeks. And all of the folks up here are doing this as volunteers out of their own times. This hasn't cost a penny to the city of Los Angeles. So with that, I want to introduce Nelson Chang. And he's going to walk you through this presentation up here to talk a little bit about what he saw and some of the recommendations that the private sector has come up with at this point.
Thanks very much, Sean. Council members, thanks for your time today. I had the great pleasure of spending some time with both Fire Station 82, Rich's fire station, along with Glendale, and as Sean mentioned, talked to a number of fire departments around the country. Next slide, please. So just to kind of set the stage a little bit, this is just roughly how things work now, right? 911 call comes in, fire station dispatches resources, there's a scene assessment, the situation is resolved, return to the firehouse, there's paperwork reporting, things like that. Next slide, please. And so I want to bucket kind of when I looked at that process in three areas how things are roughly suboptimal. So the first is, we don't have GPS transponders / digital maps in fire trucks. And the way I kind of think about this is more from both a central command and an incident command perspective. No ability to see where all the fire assets are at any given time. Need to rely on driver knowledge for physical maps. I think something Rich had mentioned is, firefighters are often staged at other firehouses, I think something around 30% of the time. And so they're not always running in their own area. But also no ability to see data layers on these digital maps. So for instance, you get there, where are the fire hydrants, where are the other trucks, important building information, and so forth. Next slide. These are a little bit redundant from some of the props that we saw before, but on the left is a photo of a firefighter on on one of these ride-alongs actually looking at a map. You can see it's dark outside, he has to unroll the map and so forth. On the right was one of the manuals that I saw in Fire Station 82, and one of the more pertinent pieces of information was it was a building architectural drawing from 1982. So they're outdated, they're old, they're not available at their fingertips. Next slide. The third one is kind of antiquated admin / reporting systems. And there's these are just two examples here, but on the left is fire inspection in terms of just having paper inspection forms and things like that. On the right is literally a daily call log that they kind of enter in, obviously not digitized, difficulty to run reports on, and so forth. Next slide. And then here's actually a screenshot that Rich supplied me. I think this is of their scheduling system, but this is something that I think is probably 30 years old, maybe older. Obviously is incredibly inefficient, it's slow, and not really serving LAFD well. So this first one is how things could be, and it was interesting hearing one of the chiefs talk about what they're doing for pilots and so forth. But the way I kind of thought about this, and I should note that this map was actually taken from a presentation that Google did with the Red Cross. But, I would want a single view of all the fire resources, right? You can then click down. So on the left-hand side, you can see that there's different layers that they can click down and see, whether it's topography, hydrants, or whatever it might be. And then also you click on a particular building and get specific information. And as an example, in Phoenix, they actually go door to door, and they go to individual business owners, and the business owners give them a DVD with architectural drawings, and they then write on a napkin information pertinent to the building. Is it busy at night? Is there hazardous materials? Is a certain door locked, et cetera, et cetera? So when they roll up onto a building, they can click on the building and get all this information at their fingertips. I should also note two other things. Seattle has a central GIS group which has been digitizing information for about 30 years. And they say they have about 100 different data layers. So they can get kind of information on all sorts of things. The other thing, too, that was interesting, I talked to FDNY last week. And for Super Bowl 2014, they seem to have built something I didn't see it myself, but they seem to have built something very similar to this. So basically they said, we need something for critical incidents. We need something for our commanders on the ground to know where all the resources are, what Super Bowl events are happening, when did they happen, both so that they can manage it, but also talk intelligently with city council members, the mayor, and so forth. And it was something that for them was instructive. They said they basically built it in 3 weeks, and was really interesting for them to figure out that they could do things quickly, and they plan to use that piece of technology going forward as their critical incident management tool. This one is, and this was touched on a little bit earlier, but having iPads for, incident command, you actually roll into the scene, and you can get both information. But on the right-hand side, that's the essentially sharing of information. You get onto the scene, and you can draw on a map, you can click on a building and get information. Other firefighters at the scene can kind of simultaneously see what's happening, as opposed to constantly being on your radios and trying to figure out where someone is and or what they're seeing. This is kind of a before and after. This is what Glendale Fire Department is doing with EPCR. I brought this as just one example, and to be frank, as I kind of went through it, you could probably do this for, a dozen or more different enterprise applications that's currently being in use. But on the left-hand side is basically, a patient care record. It's lengthy. There's 5 different forms that need to get physically sent out. I think typically it takes about 45 days for it to arrive in City Hall, 120 days before people are actually billed out. More importantly, you can't actually tell, who put in what information. If information changes over time, you can't update it. Now, on the right-hand side is what Glendale is testing right now. And this is a piece of software that was built from a single firefighter who actually has a coding background from Monterey Park. And it's essentially everything on the left-hand side, but now on an iPad. And there's a number of, beyond kind of the obvious benefits, there's a number of other kind of interesting things about it. So, for instance, firefighters arrive on the scene, and some of these patients take multiple medications. So what they'll do is they'll stack up prescription bottles into a pyramid, take a picture, and then attach it to their EPCR. They'll roll up into, they'll arrive, and they might have to transfer from an EMT to another EMT or whatever it might be, and they'll just have 2 iPads simultaneously send the data right there. They're putting in mobile terminal stations in hospitals in Glendale to accept this information, and that way they can actually arrive. The doctors ahead of time will know who's coming and so forth. I should note that New York is actually investing a lot of resources into a very similar program. Some small differences. They plan to roll out a program called Health EMS, so that hospitals actually have a giant TV screen that will show all the patients that are coming in, so that they can make sure that they're properly staffed based on the kind of the patients that are arriving and so forth. This is a quick matrix. It's basically kind of work benefit, right? Like how much work does something require versus what the benefit is. So obviously, if it doesn't cost that much work and the benefit's high, that's where you're going to want to kind of put your resources. So some obvious ones, obviously, getting iPads into the field, putting GPS transponders and things like that. Some of the higher work things are oftentimes drawing upon those easier things, such as digitizing building information. So obviously, if you have an iPad in the field, you both need the physical iPad, but then you need to be able to access a map. That map has to have digitized information and so forth. But one of the reasons why I wanted to have this slide here is there's a lot of areas that could be improved. But ultimately, and this is something that any product manager goes through, you have to go through a prioritization process and figure out what's most important and where do you want to put your resources first and how do you want to go about that. Next slide. So I just wanted to briefly touch on what the other cities are doing. I talked a little bit about this throughout. But so first with New York City, I think what they're doing for critical incident management tool is great. As Seattle, I feel like, is doing something fairly similar, and one of the things that Seattle mentioned is that they are also working with Seattle PD and other departments in there, so they seem to be fairly well tied together. New York City has also hired an analytics group, which I was fairly surprised by and really impressed. And just to tell a quick story of how this came about, because I think it's pertinent, in 2007, they were demolishing the Deutsche Bank building, which was damaged in 9/11. And in the course of demolishing it, it kind of came under the wrong building code. So it came under a code instead of demolition, it came under renovation. Long story short, 2 firefighters went in there and died. And as a result, they started a group to basically, to back up, they looked at their building inspection, and they basically said, we are inspecting in almost a haphazard manner. They cycle every few years. They have these outdated cards, which they then bring back to a fire station, which no one accesses and so forth. And they said, we need to be able to inspect the buildings that are most important. Now, the problem in New York City is that they have approximately 900,000 buildings. So their ability to inspect is quite limited. So what they ended up doing is create a data analytics group that basically has a risk score for every building. So the buildings that they have to inspect, like schools, go to the top. But then beyond that, they look at up to 2,400 different factors, everything from the type of building, its use, its location, history of fire activity, history of complaints, and really figure out which are the highest risk buildings so that we have to put resources against that. And so now they actually have a group of data scientists against that. I think they're hoping to have headcount about 10 to 15 people, but it's something that I certainly hadn't heard before. Seattle, I'd mentioned that they have a common operating picture environment working with water, police, water, and transportation. They can see all this information on an interactive map. They're also focusing very much, same with New York City too, but on mobility, mobilizing their workforce. And then the last city I want to touch on briefly is Phoenix, who has a fairly substantive technical staff, about 45 people, 20 programmers. But I should note that New York City has 130 people in their IT department. They have open headcount for 30 more, and the CIO actually felt that they could have 50 additional people beyond that. So they have, that being said, they have a department of 10,000 sworn, so they have a gigantic department. But if you simply look at purely from a IT divided by sworn firefighters, most of the other cities are staffing up much more than we are. And I want to just talk a little bit about 3 recommendations, and this is really kind of born out of my personal experience working on product over time. A lot of the stuff that I talked about, it's very easy to literally just have a single meeting and get enough work that will last you a year, 2 years, and so forth. But really, it's all about process. It's really about having a group that gets things done, And so you can call it a chief technology officer, you can call it an IT department, you can have whatever you might be, but you basically need a group that on a regular basis ships products, so to speak. I think one of the reasons why Google AdWords is so successful is, when I left, we were on what we call bi-weekly push. So every 2 weeks, everything that the thousands of engineers that worked on AdWords had worked on would get pushed out. And so it's constantly iterating, constantly improving, but it's the type of thing where really good companies, and you can see this in their websites and their products. Apple's a great example where every year you have a new iPhone, and it's constantly getting a little bit better, but that's where you end up getting much more progress, whether it's stuff that helps the pilots, whether it's helping on-the-ground incident command or helping admin systems, you have to have a group that can constantly get things done. The second thing is something I talked about a little bit in terms of product roadmap, getting broad buy-in in terms of what's being worked on and when. And the last one is something that Seattle's IT department really talked about, which was institutional buy-in. He said that when he started in their department, they had 4 people, now they have 15, and he felt that having strong institutional buy-in allowed them to really kind of get the resources that they needed to advance their cause, so to speak. And he threw out 2 examples. He said that he visited with Austin's fire department, and in that case, the head of IT essentially sat at the table with Fire Command, and that they were an integral part of the process, and that's why I felt Austin has one of the best, from a technology perspective, fire departments in the country. As opposed to, he also spent some time with Detroit's, where he said in Detroit, technology is viewed as a cost center, and in that case, they don't invest. He basically said that in Detroit, he saw things that you kind of want to tear your eyes out seeing it, but that's one of the big reasons for institutional buy-in. And then the last slide, please. These are. I want to throw this out a little bit because I didn't want to, in the course of this, I didn't want to get lost of. I think it's easy to look at this stuff and say, these are slightly better solutions, right? Rather than bringing this, you'll then have a map or whatever it might be. And I think one of the reasons why I was particularly struck by this project was how important this is particularly for both regular incidents but catastrophic incidences. So these 3 pictures are from an amazing documentary called 9/11. A pair of documentarians happened to be with a local fire station, watching some of the folks do training runs when 9/11 struck. But in there, this is in one of the towers. But you can see what's basically happening, which I think is not all that different than how some of the things occur now, which is you have a lot of chaos, a lot of firefighters, people essentially on their radios constantly saying, what are your conditions? So rather than having that, having a single resource, a digital resource where they can go in and see where every firefighter is. In Seattle, they mark all the firefighters so that they know both where the firefighter is, but also does this firefighter have scuba, deep dive experience, for instance, right? New York is working towards a world where they not only have the buildings in there, but they'll know where the firefighters are by which floor they're actually in, right? And then beyond that, they're going to link that to their radio system such that if a firefighter hits Mayday, they'll then know which firefighter said it and where the firefighter is. So, in closing, I just want to kind of emphasize the importance of this in kind of critical situations. Thank you very much.
And I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask Eva and Sam maybe to just take 1 minute or so each.
Great. Thank you for having us here today. And I just want to say a big thank you to Captain Fields and Chief Butler for keeping us safe every day. And I got involved in this project because I was kind of like, oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? And then I went and met with Captain Fields, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much we can do here and so much we could do to help. I'm a data person. My company, Factual, we work on big data. We're one of the pioneers in big data. And I saw this as really a very juicy data problem when I heard of the 18 databases that needed to be fixed, and so I brought in Nelson and others to help. But what I really wanted to say was I think these guys deserve better, and they're really in the front line doing the hard stuff. And, in all the conversations I had with them and other firefighters, it wasn't that they were complaining that they didn't get enough sleep or that they were being woken up because their systems were ineffective or complaining about facilities or bad management. They just kept telling me, we need tools that you and I as citizens have in our pockets, in the phones, the iPads. We just need these to do our jobs better. And that was so loud and clear to me. As an entrepreneur and an investor, I see the best innovations every day. A lot of them are moonshot ideas, long, far out, takes decades to happen. This is not the situation here. The opportunity, we have the technologies, it's happening elsewhere. We could bring it on into the city. So as a representative of the private sector and the tech community, we are very eager to give back to the city. I know my peers and my colleagues are committed to this project, and we will want to help see it through. So I think with a little help from everyone here and with your support, I think LAFD can really be an exemplar and model of innovation for not only fire departments in around the country, but possibly around the world. So thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. I just want to reiterate what Eva just said very well. I was born and raised in LA by Fire Station 97. I now live near 63. I've had the opportunity to spend time with Captain Fields and his team at 82, as well as do focus groups with a number of firefighters over the past few months. These men and women are amazing at their jobs, and we are so lucky to have them. Meeting them has made me feel safer as a citizen of this city. What scares me is that these men and women are expected to do their job fighting fires and saving lives without basic technology that, like Eva said, is widely available to consumers, to the public on your iPhones and tablets. If you tell an ordinary citizen of this city that their firefighters are finding a fire with a paper map, they won't believe you. Try it. And it's incredible, and it shouldn't be this way. We've seen outdated and analog systems for dispatching, mapping, records management, data access and analysis, training, reporting, all the things we've talked about today. And I personally was inspired to get involved with this because of one of my investments in a company called Mark 43, which is doing really similar work, trying to bring better data analysis and information management to law enforcement, to police departments. And in less than a year, this new company has raised funding and has penetrated some of the most complex organizations, law enforcement, police departments in three large cities around the country. We need to see that drive here. There are some issues that are bigger. They will take longer to solve. We know that not everything can be solved by snapping our fingers, but there are a lot of things happening, and led by innovators within the department like Captain Fields, who are building apps today, who are downloading apps that are available on the App Store today. It needs to be bottom up, and we need to support the innovators from within the department. And there also needs to be a commitment to top-down innovation, to investment in better systems, to empower our firefighters to do their job. It's not a matter of installing apps and buying iPads. It's a matter of public safety and saving lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that concludes the presentation part, and we'd like to move in with some questions. And I'm also going to ask Mr. Renneker to be at the table as well, because a critical part of moving forward is going to have our own ITA agency to be part of it. And they are our prism of which we look through often when we're moving to technological solutions. So I'd like to, for the first questions, I'd like to actually defer to my colleague whose motion this is, Mr. Bonner, if you'd like to get us started. And I've got a lot of questions, but I'd like you to give you that opportunity.
Oh, okay. I actually won't ask very many because I think they really did a very good job being comprehensive. I may have a few thoughts at the end, but just wanted to tease out a little bit if there's anything that wasn't mentioned, Pat or Captain Fields. When I was out at Fire Station 5, where they were beta testing, there was someone there from, I believe it was Apple that day, who showed that there was actually sort of an app store of different tools. Can you tell us just a little bit about that and what other kind of apps there are for first responders that you might not have mentioned?
I'll have Captain Fields, who our fireground captain here.
We, again, reached out to the firefighters, boots on the ground, asked them what they were aware of, what they knew was out there. Even Los Angeles County Fire Department, their firefighters union has done a great job in taking some of their union funds and developing apps specifically for firefighters. So those things are widely known. And we got quite a bit of feedback, well over 50 apps that are available, either free on the App Store, and started putting those things together. We've developed a great relationship with Apple, with Verizon as well, in helping us, just reaching out to the public sector and asking for help in this. Apple has supplied a mobile device management system and has helped us to develop a small app store, which has those apps in them that some of them are for mapping, data, paramedic information, so on and so forth. So,
wanted to ask a question about durability. One of the concerns that we heard very early on was, are these devices durable enough? I should say, first of all, while we use iPads for shorthand, any tablet will do. We're not sort of prejudging, what vendor or what technology. How have you addressed durability questions? I dropped mine on the bus last week and got a little crack. So, what are you doing about that?
Well, we looked into three of the major providers for durable cases, OtterBox, Gumdrop, just to name a few, and have actually tried those out. We actually, in one of our presentations, just simply tossed it across the room down the aisle inside one of those cases, just to see, and it was fine. There's.
Can you tell me where I can get one of those?
Yeah, and the other piece about durability is that I've had mine while I'm an incident commander, but this is one of the iPads I've had for my time as a chief officer, and it's been through fires. I've dropped it, and even the case I have isn't that sophisticated. But like Pilot Davison can tell you, and others, that the durability, the cases they make now are phenomenal. I've been to a lot of recent fire and EMS trade shows where it's just, that is not even an issue anymore, the durability. Just have to invest in the right case and use it.
Can you explain by contrast the current very durable device the department uses that the firefighters I've talked to seem to refer to as their chiropractor's dream, which is the Tough Books, and how those weigh?
Currently, we use the Tough Book for our electronic patient care record system, and it has a carrying strap. So you actually have a strap where you keep it, because it does weighs a lot. Not only that, but it costs. You can buy 6 iPads for the cost of one Tough Book. But in terms of durability, at some point you have to. What's the trade-off between what's going to be the easiest to carry and manipulate, and to have a single device? Because we can have 20 tablets, but really at the end of the day, can we have a single device that'll do all the things that, from what the pilot talked about to what Rich talked about and all that. So it is the tough book. It's precisely the name. It's tough, and it weighs like 8 pounds, and it has a carrying strap.
It felt heavier than 8 pounds when I held it, but maybe it's because it wasn't working. It was just accumulating weight. And of course, one of the other values to the tablet is that they're more adaptable to new technology. You can add an app every day as new technology comes up. Just wanted to ask, as we continue the beta test, what sort of information would be beneficial to you or the working group or the task force to have in terms of teasing out the potentials for patient care software and database integration?
Yeah, I think, and actually Rich Captain Fields has worked on this aspect of it, of some of the databases that are accessible out there that we can begin to kind of use. So, Rich, what are some, maybe briefly, a few of the databases you think would help?
We need cooperation. We need access. We know that the databases, the information is available. There's often a reluctance to look at something that isn't the norm, which is an Apple device or an Apple computer or whatever, and simply to say, let's try it. That's what we need, the cooperation. We need the testing ground just to say whether it works or not. And if it does, then the data will support that, and if it doesn't, likewise.
Yeah. Some of those databases would be, Councilman, would be maybe access to some of the our computer-aided dispatch CAD data. Obviously nothing that's HIPAA protected or personal health information, maybe access to fire prevention records, access to our staffing database, and I think it's all doable. I mean, it's all there. I think we can find a way to connect this. I do want to say a comment too that the department does have different technologies at various stages of completion. AVL and GPS is being installed in the vehicles. In fact, I was with one of the installers today, and that so we're seeing different varying projects that are moving forward, but I think a singular tablet device is really what I think most of the firefighters are looking for.
Just to wrap up my part, I just want to thank you guys, the department, for allowing this to happen. I want to thank all the members of the task force. When I was talking earlier about guys who were developing apps before I took office, Captain Fields was one of them. Chief Butler has been sort of way ahead of the curve on this. And I got to say, it was Chief Butler who had the brains to reach out to the Bixel Exchange and the Chamber and create the private partner working group. So thank you very much, and thanks to the Bixel Exchange and to Verizon and Apple for the donations. Also, our staff doesn't get enough credit. I want to thank John Gregory on my staff, who's not listening to me right now, for really throwing himself in with his typical 140% on this one. So I got some ideas on how we might move forward, but I'd love to hear you guys, your questions.
Great. And for me, it's very exciting. I mean, I did a ride along with the fire department recently, and was visiting the station and got a call. And yeah, they're using the maps above, but actually someone had put their own sort of rogue Jeep, Garmin in there as a separate unit, and people are creating their own technological fixes. So the idea that we can have a more comprehensive approach to that makes a lot of sense. More of not a technology, it was sort of a process question. We're working with certain contractors. Do we have relationships with those contractors? How are we doing that? Because I know doing different pilot projects, sometimes we run into trouble down the road when we don't have the right contracts, and then when we move a project into a secondary phase, we get sued. What contractors are we working with, and under what existing license relationships?
So currently, Verizon, who donated or on loan, we have an existing contract with them, and they provide us our phones, and they actually have us test other phones for them. So per se, we have Verizon working with us, but we have them already existing, and they helped us with the iPads. We haven't entered into any contract negotiations with anybody. This is not what this committee is about, and I completely understand your concerns, and so would we. That yes, this is not about giving anybody an advantage on anything. This is about best practices. So directly, no, we don't have any contract with any one specific person out there to do anything for this task force. It's really just a bunch of volunteers, and the IT department is always there to help us. In fact, over the weekend, I had tremendous support from them on a couple issues we were having. So we're not, and then when we get to that point, obviously, we will vet all those things out in the right areas with the right time, sunshine, everything. But this is really grassroots. So to your answer, council member, we're not engaged in any contracts with anybody. This is kind of a labor of love for the tech community and us.
Great. And you mentioned ITA, and with Mr. Redeker here, just in terms of their involvement and what resources you need from them, or what additional resources you need, and maybe I can even have Mr. Redeker comment if you're willing, in terms of what else is needed from your perspective for good implementation.
Well, first, I want to give kudos to the fire staff, the Biscal group. I mean, all the recommendations are solid. I agree with those all. I think the one thing that's going to be key to the success, and I really agree with it with the concluding thoughts, was there really needs to be a CIO type of position like LAPD has that provides a consistent and thorough implementation of these technologies out there, because there are a lot of back-end solutions that are extremely out of date that the firefighters really need, and you really have to be addressing those issues at the same time you'd be delivering on the front-end side. So the ITA is very supportive of a CIO position for the LAFD, and we're here to help in any means possible. I think one of the things that the city doesn't have that we'll need as we move forward is we don't have app developers for the mobile platform. We have people to do it from a hobbyist perspective, don't get me wrong. And I think if we're really going to move to our platforms like this, and this is across the city, that we need to invest in those new tools and possibly some positions of people that can have the expertise, because as was mentioned here, you can lift these apps up in weeks as opposed to months and years that take our legacy applications to do that. So we certainly support that.
Make sure you exchange business cards with the folks sitting behind you.
Yeah. Well, that's important, and then the apps, and then the integration. I mean, that's what excites me too. Is it's not just you having an iPad or any, in the air, but it's getting all those resources to integrate and speak to each other, and so you can use a heat map from above and get that information out there.
Sure. I just thank you. I'm really quite blown away, and this report was so comprehensive and so thorough that I don't have so many questions as just comments and observations. And first of all, I want to thank our colleague Mike Bonin with our colleagues Mitch Englander and Felipe Fuentes for leading the effort on this important initiative. And it's kind of shocking, isn't it, that of the Fire Station 82, which I think was, we dedicated it 2 years ago, right, 2012?
Yes.
And yet you imported maps from the 80s that you're using on the dashboards, or you were until it's amazing that we built a new fire station, but we imported 80s technology it's kind of crazy. So from the 19th century to the 21st century, indeed. And the good thing is, none of us have to take responsibility for what happened in the 20th.
Correct.
So we can get us to the 21st. But we are responsible for that moving forward. So I think it's just terrific that this went forward on a trial basis in Fire Station 82 in Hollywood in the 13th. So thank you for that. And for the task force and your incredible work, and Chief Butler, I'm really just blown away. And I love the new term it's new to me, funnel vision. I'm definitely going to figure out how to steal that in some way.
Sir, you can. This is a public meeting. It's all yours.
Open source. Yeah.
I love it. Some questions I have, I guess one question is, under what circumstance could such a system be disabled? You talk about a catastrophic event, and whether it be a major earthquake that everyone talks about, or whether it be some sort of unfortunate, terrorist attack.
So I think the paper maps, to your point, Councilmember, the paper maps are excellent backup, and we still use them. You go to a command post to use it. So the paper maps are excellent. The other thing is that a lot of these maps will become native to the tablet, so it won't be accessed from the web. It'll be on the tablet device, and so those are a couple backups. The other thing is we did some work with the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, and this is downrange, but if we did have a significant event, that the military has hastily formed network that they can bring down here, which is basically a wireless system. And they brought it to the tsunami-ravaged countries where they set out. So downrange, we can get back into wireless applications. But I will tell you as a 24-year member of the department is that technology is not going to replace firefighters. We've honed our craft and our skill based on what we've learned on our job, and I still know how to go back to paper. Just like the captain of a ship who's sailing across the ocean has the latest technology, but they have their charts. And I think that could buy you that sense of comfort to know that we're not going to step away, especially in a critical job like public safety.
Councilman, one of the terms that I've learned is redundancy. And I believe Mr. Renner could speak to that. It's critical to developing any application that it has to have a backup. Radio system has to be backed up by a cellular system that has to be backed up by native applications. And that's what we're focusing on here. So we're constantly speaking redundancy when we address the possibility of new applications.
Right. One quick question. You had one of the maps here, the one that there was a fire in West LA in that commercial district. Yes. There were these icons of the flames on the rooftop. What do those mean?
So those are put in manually by us, but this is the location of where the fire was in the section of the building. The reason we knew that is because the fire is towards the Division Charlie side. So I quickly, with my iPad, it's a stamp. I know where the fire is at and where we want to make sure we don't cause damage to the rest of the building. So the benefit of this is mostly the aerial image, but it's also great for training in post-action. What did we do? Come out and learn. And so this is all entered manually, but it's shared instantly. This is what was shared to me from the fire, the Colby fire. The tank chief manually entered this, drew it all out, stamped it. It was 1 in the morning, so this looks daylight, but by the time he sent me, well, actually this is for the next days, but they pushed the image out immediately.
And by draw it out, you mean like a click? It's just a click. And it's right there.
Click, and then he sends me the image.
Because that speaks to your chief, your objectives,
yes.
Response time. It speaks to everything.
Correct.
It's pretty brilliant. And then I just think moving forward, an observation is that we have an eye toward any future contractual obligations so that we can enable the creation of a system and be very nimble. So we're not locking ourselves into something where we would then incur some sort of legal action against us because of a contract that we were not looking into the foreseeable future to the degree that we should have.
I spent some time on a conference call with Nelson. In fact, the conference called FDNY, and so I echo what he saw. I was with him on the calls. One of the things that New York did is they developed kind of like a spin-off group that does quick contracts with local developers. So if you need a kind of a quick app, or if you need something that they have built this business model that the local tech developers in New York know quickly where to go. So yeah, we're all for developing something that will satisfy legally our requirements as a city, but also something that we can get some quick work out of. Like you say, this project here, there was no RFP. This was all basically done by collaboration, and maybe a great model to replicate for other projects.
And we make it very clear in conversations with anyone that this is no promise of anything outside of developing a beta test model that we can show what could be. And so we are very cognizant of not crossing any legal lines or taking on any responsibility.
And my concern isn't that you will. My concern is that we don't. In the future, as we start negotiating future contracts, that we can build in the ability to get the system up and running with as little grief as possible.
And also, I think we can also maybe look at repurposing money that's already out there for technology. And I think to speak to Mr. Renneker's point is that all these different projects, maybe there's money out there already set aside. Maybe we think about repurposing the money to maybe, common strategy. And the mayor's 9 goals is something the fire chief and I had talked about last week too, about, very much we want to make sure that we're all as a city in alignment. And the council member has been Councilman Bonnet. I'm also partial to him because I live in his district and I grew up there. So anyhow.
All right, your street will get paved now.
Well, thank you so much. I'm all about how do we make this happen. So thank you so much.
And then the question, how do we prioritize given the other technology needs of the fire department, the CAD system, the vehicle locator system, you had the chart which was useful in terms of the quadrants and saying what's useful. But that's also something that I guess that you guys have to help us grapple with.
My boss is here, Chief Palacios, so maybe he can kind of speak to some of the ongoing projects that are out there that are kind of somewhat parallel and separate to this. But
Darren Palacios, Deputy Chief. Good afternoon. One of the things that we are pushing for in the budget was the Chief Information Officer or the Chief Technology Officer for the fire department. We recognize that we need that technology strategic plan as part of our department strategic plan, and we're working on that. And one of the things we're trying to do is come forward on that. PA Consulting has weighed in, or will be weighing in very shortly on a lot of that direction as well. That you've hired that consulting firm to do that. They're going to weigh in on that as well. So we're kind of waiting for all of these dominoes to fall as you are on these issues. But we did put in the budget a pretty good technology package. We didn't put in the position for the Chief Information Officer, and we feel we really need to get that technology strategic plan going so everything will pull in a line and dovetail into it.
Because that was my sort of follow-up related question. I mean, so far we've done what we've done with no cost, so there'll be no direct general fund cost, but clearly to do this right there will be, and want to make sure that whatever you're putting into your budget proposal is reflecting that, because we get to that step fairly soon.
Yes.
Great.
If I could just comment on
Please.
that just briefly. If we look at the priority of items and we put it in a pyramid, quite frankly, putting this map in digital form will fall very far down on that priority list, which allows us to focus on the beauty of this relationship that we've built with the private sector, because quite frankly, with our staffing reductions, with budgetary constraints, although this is important in relation to AVL or GPS or things that help us collect or recoup funds, it falls down on the priority list. This is something that this partnership can focus on, the smaller things, the lower hanging fruit that are valuable to the boots on the ground firefighter, but may not get addressed by normal budgetary process.
Yeah, sort of a systemic problem. Capacity building and sort of is always extremely important in the long-term health of any institution and organization like the city, but it doesn't have its own natural constituency even within, agencies, because your first priority as a department is looking at your staffing requirements and not having enough boots on the ground and sort of the immediacy. So it's nice to have a step back to be able to look at the capacity issues. And I look at this, being very much tech guy, the tech stuff is a critical part of our overall capacity. And so that's something that we've got to do maybe as a council is make some of those hard choices that are not as popular, don't have the constituencies directly, but that ultimately are in the long-term health of the city and of the agency as well.
The collaboration that has been phenomenal. That's one thing about collaboration. It's definitely a renewable energy that we've seen. It's kind of cool to see what we've gotten accomplished so far. And we thank you. And our recommendation would be if we could just continue our beta test, given the guidelines you've given us in terms of, we're not contracting anything, continue our beta test, and then maybe come back in a few months and give you some updates and whatever the council would request from us.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to ask them to continue the beta test. I'd also like them to specifically ask that they look at doing a beta test in a fire station in Council District 3. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to try to do one in Council District 12, for that matter. But I'd also ask, as you go forward on the beta test, that you begin to tease out the possibilities of some of the other ways to use technology. If LAFD and ITA could help provide to the First In Task Force some of the servers and the databases that Chief talked about, fire prevention records, staff databases, anything that's sort of not proprietary that would help them tease out other stuff. And if we could see if there's a way to work with Sansio to see if we can beta test the non-HIPAA sensitive electronic patient care stuff on the iPad to see if there's any potential for it.
And I think those are all good suggestions, and although we'll formalize this at the end after public comment, but I would add to that a direction that they also work with ITA directly in the early stages. I think now is really the time to get them involved, because that's how ultimately this is going to be successful, is by engaging ITA folks. So thank you all very much. We have public comment next before we do the motion, but really appreciate all of you coming forward and making this presentation. It's really informative and eye-opening, and thank Mr. Bonin for bringing the motion forward. And we look forward to working with you as this moves forward. So next we're going to move to public comment on this issue. We have 3 public comment cards. Allison Gingold first, followed by Mr. Don Garza, followed by Kevin Motis. So, Ms. Gingold.
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Allison Gingold, and I am not a tech expert, nor do I know enough about the fire department, but I am both a concerned citizen, a member of our Los Angeles community, and also the Los Angeles affiliate for the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation. And I'm here to basically give a personal testament to the importance of emergency medical response. In 2009, my son was a victim of sudden cardiac arrest in Israel and survived because of early response of the staff in the hotel and of an automatic external defibrillator. And we were very fortunate for his survival. There's over 400,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests a year, and of those, close to 10% are the only ones that make it. So it can be increased, and part of the increase is from, obviously, early response, both CPR response and AED response. Upon returning home and working with the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation, I learned a lot of statistical analysis, and I became quite a big advocate for CPR awareness, education, training, et cetera. One of the things that I saw a year ago was in the Los Angeles Times when Councilman Bonin had introduced this motion and wanted to renovate the fire department's use of paper into modern technology. And at our kitchen table, we were all flabbergasted that in an age where all of my children are extremely comfortable in every type of technology now, they use it in their schools, they use it after school, it's used in our schools for iPads, and now our own Los Angeles Fire Department doesn't have it. So in order for the most efficient integration of emergency response, I advocate for the motion that that technology gets adopted by the fire department and that we move forward so that Los Angeles can be a proud example for the rest of the nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Next we have Mr. Don Garza, followed by Kevin Motis. Mr. Garza.
I'm very impressed, and I'm very proud. This committee and the City Council has proven that it has a sense of urgency to make sure that the lives of the citizens of this city are their number one priority. The Los Angeles Fire Department has just told you it's not an indictment against them. I personally think it's an indictment against those of us that are citizens that have not been pushing our city to implement these technological advances that all of us have access to. I'm proud of my fire department. I personally think one of the very first things that should be implemented is things that monitor where our firemen are, like they showed right here. because they are very valuable. One of the most valuable assets that this community, the city of LA, has. Just to let you know, I sit on the Public Health and Safety Committee of the Downtown Los Angeles Neighborhood Council. And let me tell you, with a lot of the codes changing downtown with these taller structures, I feel for my firefighters. I love my firefighters. I lived in Skid Row. I'm still served in the historic core. After I moved from Skid Row by Station Number 9, the busiest fire department in the city. I'm just elated. I'm a little bit concerned. I'm glad you asked the questions that you asked. What's going to happen? What are the redundancies if everything fails? As a do-it-yourselfer, somebody that has a little coding experience, I'm working on some things on our homeless issue. And it's very important that we should be ready, and it will probably coalesce and be ready for the fire department to actually work with those little applications that I'm also creating. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm so proud of you. Sense of urgency, let's get this done expeditiously. Give them whatever they need. Let's work it out. And read Ray Kurzweil's book. Read Ray Kurzweil. He was just hired as the chief engineer for Google. Some people are going to tell you he's a kook. I know you're very familiar with Ray Kurzweil and the law of exponential returns. I want all you guys up here to read his book on the law of exponential returns, and you'll understand there's hope.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garza. Next, we have Mr. Modis.
Yeah. Hi, Kevin Modis, Citizens for Safe Technology. I'd like to have additional time from this committee to kind of match the pro-technology presentation you've been given. I'm very concerned about the health effects associated with wireless devices, and I handed out from the Firefighters Union a resolution, a 29-page resolution citing all kinds of organizations from around the world citing very established studies that show health effects from wireless exposure. And I think our firefighters deserve more than being heavily exposed at work to this technology. No one argues with the power of this technology, but no one's willing to look at the radio frequency radiation it emits. The World Health Organization has shown that there's a positive association between wireless devices and brain cancer. Okay, and the radio frequency that's emitted, radiation emitted by the iPads, is greater than a cell phone. People are talking about using it in different environments. It's not wise in any of these environments, and it really needs to change. I included with you an article from Vice President Biden's son, who recently had a brain tumor removed from behind his ear, the most common place to have a tumor when you use a cell phone. And he won't talk about what happened to him and why he went to the MD Anderson Center and why he has a 6-inch scar over his ear. This is our government's approach to this issue. Let's hide the health effects. Let's not talk about them. In Canada, Dr. Miller, who's on the World Health Organization, a scientist, and he's in the World Health Organization group, and he says if we reviewed the studies today, we would increase the World Health Organization classification of these wireless microwaves from a Class 2B carcinogen to a Class 2A carcinogen. We would increase it to a probable carcinogen. And I have a videotape of him publicly stating this to the Canadian government, who's willing to look at health effects while we're not willing to. What you have here is engineers and technicians presenting, and no medical personnel who are willing to look at this. We have people from UCLA and USC, but what we don't have is John Samet from the World Health Organization, the chair of that group, who's at USC and the director of global health, who classified this as a carcinogen. We don't have Dr. Kifitz from UCLA, who has shown positive health effects from wireless exposure to wireless devices. And that was a repeat of a study that had already been done in Europe and was NIH funded. It's time we look at this, and the reality is, Councilman O'Farrell, you will not meet with me. You will not meet with me in person, and Councilman Bonin refers to everyone else. This is inexcusable.
Thank you very much.
Our firefighters deserve better than this.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I just note that we received, for the record, for the file, a letter in support of this from the United Firefighters of Los Angeles City.
Okay. Thank you very much. So noted. So we were just discussing the motion prior to that. Without objection, as the direction added by myself and Mr. Bonin, both directions without objection. That is the order. This This item is approved, and thank you all for coming in for this. We do have another item before we close the committee down. So we'll move on now to our last item, which is actually what we have to do is we adjourn the regular ITGS meeting. So let me do that. And now we begin the special meeting. Look at that, two hits, and now we're in our ITGS special meeting. So, Mr. Villanueva, would you please read special item number 1?
Okay, item number 1 on the special agenda is a city attorney report relative to the retention of outside counsel for the citywide pre-internet service project, and we have 1 speaker card for this item.
Okay. Why don't we start with the city attorney and ITA coming to the table? Speaker card. Okay, if we could, once the doors get closed here, we'll begin. We could close the back doors. Okay, first I want to thank the City Attorney's Office and the City Clerk's Office for their work in getting this report out and moving fast to agendize it. That's why we had to do, we need 24 hours notice, so that's why we're doing it on a special agenda item rather than on the regular agenda. So if you would begin with your presentation, identify yourself. And
good morning, Laurel. I guess it's good afternoon, Laurel Leitner from the City Attorney's Office. As you know, in response to your November instruction to ITA that they develop an RFP for citywide internet services, the City Attorney's Office became involved and determined that the level that the City Attorney's Office does not possess the level of expertise that is required in order to marshal this whole project through. And so we issued an RFP for expert counsel to help with all phases of development of the RFP through drafting of all the transactional documents that would be necessary in the event that we select a proposer. 4 firms responded to the request for proposals, and Best Krieger was the proposing team that provided the best combination of excellent expertise in the field with an attractive price. The ITA has identified funding in the amount of $300,000 that we anticipate will get us through this project through this fiscal year. Additional funding for fiscal year 14-15 will be addressed in future reports. Do you have any questions?
And any other opening comments from our
She did a fine job.
Okay, great. So we talk about, the need, why we need to have outside counsel, and you said it, basically.
In order to negotiate contracts and actually help us develop a cogent legal theory, we really need people who've had experience with implementing fiber and wireless projects across the country. Our office does not have that experience. We have not done that in the city of Los Angeles. This project is estimated to have a 10-year life and could very well go much farther into the future. I think that the city, as well as the City Attorney's Office, would be well served to hire expert counsel that could help the City Attorney's Office. We, of course, will be doing a lot of work. There will be a lot of work associated with this. But in order to develop legal strategy, conduct proper negotiations with selected proposers, I think we would be best served to have expert counsel. The counsel that we are recommending has implemented both fiber and Wi-Fi systems for a number of different public entities. It's clear when you look at their resume that they have a rich wealth of information. They've also got in addition to having Washington, D.C. lawyers, they've got offices here, and that will help cut down on the price. They will be very accessible to us. Some of the people who will be working with us are from Washington, D.C., but we have a very strong local presence also.
Great. Questions from my colleagues?
One, Mr. Chair. So it's great that funds were identified this year. Any ballpark idea of what future funding requirements are in upcoming fiscal years?
Yeah, Steve Reniker, ITA. What we have done is we have put forward a budget package on an estimate for not only additional potential legal expenses, but we've also put in the ask for the needs of the departments that have said if this project moves forward, we need to be reimbursed to expedite the permitting and inspection process, or if you're attaching to any of our devices, we have to be reimbursed from that. So we've put in a budget amount for both of those items for the ITA, so hopefully through that process that will be able to move forward. And those will all be negotiable items as well with Best and Krieger as part of the process. So maybe we would only have to carve out just the legal expenses, and maybe through the negotiations with outside counsel, they would have the vendor pick up the support requirements that the city has already placed in the RFP. But in case they don't, we have a budget package to address that.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple. Has Best and Krieger worked with other municipalities?
Yes.
Which ones?
Well, I'm Ann Haley. My name is Ann Haley of the City Attorney's Office. I manage outside counsel for the city. Indeed, Best and Krieger even has worked with this city before, if that is your group. They've had contracts with this city, but also with regard to Wi-Fi and internet, they've done similar work with the city of Houston and Mountain View. That's right, and St. Paul, Minnesota, which was the big matter that was close to what we are doing here, or attempting to do.
So how long-term a relationship are we envisioning? Are they going to help us negotiate the contracts, or are we then going to need them on for the life of the contracts? Because I imagine for instance, we've had for street furniture in the city of Los Angeles, we've had a contract with someone for, over a dozen years now, and there continues to be issues that come up with that contract. I don't think we used an outside attorney for that, and so we use inside counsel. If we have an outside counsel for the negotiating of the contract, are we going to have a need for it during the life of the contract?
There may be some as-needed consulting that is necessary, but what we really anticipate is working very closely with Best Krieger to develop the contracts so that whichever city attorneys, there will be a number of city attorneys involved in there will be a number of city contracts. So there will be a number of city attorneys from a number of different city attorney divisions working on these contracts. I, at this point, am just guessing, but what I foresee is that with respect to the overall technological legal strategy, we will have heavy involvement from Best and Krieger. And then in terms of negotiating the technological elements of the contract, we would absolutely need their help.
But
forward, we also expect that our office will develop a level of expertise to deal with the ongoing contracts and whatever contracts come up.
So we'll download a lot of knowledge from them? I couldn't resist the download analogy, I'm sorry.
But typically we enter into what we would propose is to enter into initially a 3-year contract with the firm, which is what we typically do, a 3-year outside counsel contract.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been a major bottleneck in essence for moving the project forward, and I'm just pleased that the city attorney's been very responsive and has been able to move this forward, and getting them on board, getting Best and Krieger on board will help us all out to know what we're dealing with and be the best, most efficient RP we can. So thank you very much for coming forward with that. Any other question? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. We also, if you were ending, we have some technical corrections that we would like to. We moved so quickly that we now need to add some technical corrections to our transmittal.
Yeah, so
we need to change some accounts.
Please. We have one. The first is just in effect that the fund account number that we need the transfer to come to is to our outside counsel account. I know who to tell, which would actually be Fund 009301, and that's our outside counsel line item. So it's Fund 100/12/009301. That's the outside counsel account rather than the contractual services. And also, the firm, as is their ethical duty, has alerted us to the fact that there's a potential conflict, which we're not concerned with, but we need to alert you to, and that is that the firm represents Terragen Power, and they are in negotiations with the DWP over a water contract. Not really adverse at this point. It's just that they're on, the opposite sides of the table in terms of negotiating, but not adverse with regard to litigation or anything. The other thing is that the lawyers who work on that matter will not be working on this one. And we've waived other conflicts for this very firm as well. So we recommend waiver. We're not concerned with that representation, so we would, but of course you as the client would have to waive that, and we could make that a part of.
Make that a part of the report, yes. Both the change in the line item number and the reference,
yes.
or the waiver of the
the Terragen potential conflict, and that's spelled TERRA-GEN Power, which is a client of theirs.
Okay. Without objection, we will add those two into the report, and we have a speaker card. So, without any additional comments, we'll move to public speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have Kevin Modis.
Hi, my name is Kevin Modis with Citizens for Safe Technology. I gave a handout to the committee. On the first page, it points out that the Italian Supreme Court rules that cell phones can cause cancer. So there is definitely research that conclusively shows this causes cancer, cardiac problems, immune system problems, and neurological problems they call electrosensitivity. By taking on this initiative, you're going to need attorneys because you are going to be opening the city up to a massive amount of lawsuits. There are lawsuits related to smart meters right now, cell phones, anything using wireless. When the World Health Organization classified this as a Class 2B carcinogen, they did not specify the source. It's the microwaves that all wireless use that cause cancer and other health effects, and we need to stop ignoring it. The next page is an article written by George Carlo. He's a scientist and he's also an attorney, and he led one of the largest studies in health effects that was ever done, $28 million, okay? After he did the study, the cell phone companies fired him. He put out a book showing that cell phones definitely cause health effects, especially cancer, and he demarcated how the cell phone company has been protecting themselves. What they've been doing is wearing down clients who sue them for tumor growth. And then after they wear them down, they settle with them. So there's no precedent set. Is the city willing to pay off thousands and thousands of people? And I hope people out there hear that this is going to be a very easy way to sue Los Angeles City. And that's by suing them for health effects, including neurological effects, electrosensitivity. And since this article was written, the studies have just become more conclusive, and the literature and evidence all over the world has just come to a head. We need to take this into account and stop putting our head in the sand. The ignorance about this issue is incredible. You're taking advice from the wireless companies that are partnering up with the fire department and doing these things. Of course they're not going to talk about health effects, but the health effects are real. The wireless companies are lying to you, but the tumors are not going to lie. People really are getting sick, and if you would ever have a hearing on this issue, I could bring in droves of people who are getting sick from all forms of wireless. Some of them are being driven out of the city due to Wi-Fi. Some are getting brain tumors due to wireless devices and things like that. Just because people aren't sick yet doesn't mean they're not going to be sick down the road. And just because you're not sick doesn't mean other people aren't sick. Women are definitely more susceptible to this kind of microwave radiation and more absorbent, and children are as well. The FCC guidelines that are currently in place are not safety standards. They do not cover children. They do not cover pregnant women.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the information and testimony. And I believe that covers our items. Is that correct? Okay, so without objection, this hearing is now concluded. Thank you.
And I'd like to meet with each one of you individually, personally, because this issue is of great importance and it needs to be stopped being swept under the carpet.